Hey folks, I'm so glad you're here. Welcome to The Human Show. My name is Trish, and I am a mom, a certified adult chair life coach, and an evolving human like you. And my intention is to raise the vibration of the planet by helping to expand the emotional intelligence of as many people as possible. I am here to hold space and share wisdom in support of your personal evolution. I know the path can sometimes be dark, so let's carry a light for each other and find our way. Here we go. Folks, thanks for being here. Super excited to have a wonderful guest joining me today, who is also a dear friend, a fellow coach, and she made time to chat with me today about her story of adversity. Thank you for joining us today, Angela Johnson.
Oh, thank you, Trish. And it's just a pleasure to be here. And I love you and I adore spending time with you.
Thank you. Right back at you.
Yes, thank you. And even though we're talking about grief and adversity, we're going to have fun and open our hearts doing it.
It's always a great conversation with you. So I'm excited.
Yes.
So then let's get into it. Actually, before we get into it, I would love if you would just share something you'd like people to know about you today.
Well, I am a certified master coach. I am a mother. I'm a spouse. I am a lover of books. I am still exploring my personhood beyond all my rules. And the biggest growth I've had this year has been in embracing the art of compassionate self-forgiveness. And it has led to immense freedom. And I absolutely love who I'm becoming. And it is in part the work of the adult chair and other modalities that have brought me to where I am now. And the road here was not easy. It was absolutely worth it. And along the way, I've met some incredible people that I still hold dear today, you being one of them.
Thank you. That's awesome. I love how you said you're exploring your personhood. I love that.
Right. So often, and I don't think it's limited to one gender or the other.
Right.
But people who identify as women, especially, identify with roles and who we are to other people. And we have been identified as such by others historically throughout the generations. And I really love seeing people reclaim who they actually are and not just what they do or who they are to other people.
Yeah.
And honestly, the grief journey is really about just who we are and how much we can learn to love our own, like all the cookie cutter versions of us. And what I mean by that is like, I have these little cookie cutters I keep here to explain to clients. And like our today self is the outer version of our gingerbread cookie cutter. And we are every age we've ever been.
Love that.
All within us. And here we are. And a lot of times when we're triggered, we're one of these younger selves. We're definitely not today's self with today's tools. And what is grief if not being triggered by loss and abandonment again and again and again, right? And the process of coming out of it is just learning to love every bit unconditionally, and not just loving unconditionally, but giving ourselves unconditionally loving acceptance. And I think we're just stuck in a stage of grief until we can fully step into that piece of it. And I will say my grief lasted years. And it's just been in the last few learning these skills that I've been able to step out of it and start thriving again and not just surviving.
Yeah, that's powerful. So can you share a bit about your grief story?
Yeah, my grief probably started when I was young because I learned how to stop my feelings. And so, I mean, grief doesn't have to be a major loss to be a grief. All change brings with it grief because all change is an ending and a beginning. And even if it's a really exciting, beautiful change we've been wanting or looking forward to, there's something we're saying goodbye to. And so there's grief in that. So often we end up hitting our first bigger grief with a bucket already full of smaller, unprocessed griefs. And what I do know about grief is it is the internal Monica closet. So if anyone who's fan of Friends knows you open that door, everything falls out. Grief doesn't care what you're grieving. If the door opens a crack, everybody's rushing out. Like all the old griefs are rushing out. And so I was lucky enough to be in my late 30s when my first big grief happened. And it was a diagnosis of a very, very dreadful diagnosis of cancer in my mother, my dear mother, who is my person, my biggest supporter, my emotional support, and someone I learned how to love very beautifully from. She was gifted at loving and accepting and making people feel welcome and just holding really beautiful space. And it was so hard to face losing her. And, given the time that we were told we'd have with her, which thankfully was she lived. She was given less than a year and she lived 6 years. And so that was a gift, but there is also grief in watching someone die in slow motion in front of you for that long. And so much changed. Our relationship changed so many times. Her capacity changed so many times. Her ability to be an involved grandma in the ways that she had been in my kids' life and my siblings' kids before that changed many, many times during different stages of treatment. And what I realized after she died, well, let me back up first, because I will say that grief opened me wide up. And what I knew was that I didn't want to waste the time I had with my mom grieving. I knew there would be time for that. What I wanted to do was imagine what I wished I would have done or said or asked after she was gone. And that was a that was a job. That was a tearful job. And I made a big list. And then I asked her what she wanted to do. And we put our list together and we did a lot of things. And so there's a strength or a refusal to give up or give in. Part of my grief was knowing I wanted to squeeze every bit of the time I had with my mom. Not to say that, I also didn't have sick kids and we couldn't go see her for a while or life got busy, but especially when she was on hospice, we were trying to squeeze out what we could, knowing that there would be time to grieve later. And what a gift to have not had to do that younger. Like I was 43 when my mother died, a very grown person, and her death broke me in a way I didn't know was possible. And I found myself just blown away by how many people have someone very important die way sooner than 43. And still, you look around, they're still living, like they're still making it through, right? And so my grief was not just missing my mother and everything that made her beautiful and the joy she brought and the jokes she would tell and the stories she knew about all of us and just the ways that she cared for and loved and the she had nicknames and little special stories and code words with each of her grandkids. Not just a one size fits all relationship with all of them. She had a very unique and beautiful way of loving all of the kids. And it wasn't just that missing from our family and from our gatherings. It was also the way she loved me. And it took me a year, but on the first anniversary of her death, I was trying to figure out, like, oh, that poor girl. me, a year ago me, knowing that she was going to die that day, and all the things that a year ago me was going to have to face without her. I had the most compassion for myself I'd ever had in my life. And I realized that one of the things that had been so lonely about that year without her was that no one else on earth was ever going to love me the way she had loved me. And what a gift to be loved so well. I realized I didn't know how to love myself that way. I'd never had to because she was there to do that for me. What a gift. And as I was grieving that no one was going to love me that way, I heard in my head, clear as day, no, honey, that's your job now. Whew.
Wow.
And that still gets me all these years later. And I knew that was truth. Knew in a flash that was absolute truth. And I had no idea how to do it. Like, okay, and how?
Where's the instruction booklet?
Right. Okay. Easier said than done. So that was basically the job of the next probably 3-ish years, was realizing, yeah, that is my job. I am grown. It's my job to learn how to love myself that way. And one of the things I had realized about my mom and the way she loved me was that she loved with open hands. And it was like her love was just there like it wasn't trying to squeeze or twist or steer. There was no agenda. You just picked it up if you wanted it. It was your gift. And I realized like how few people love that cleanly in life in this world. And I realized I wasn't even loving my kids that cleanly. There was some steering happening. And, we're parents, and my kids were still living in my house, all of them at that time. So, there's some steering we do as parents, but I was able to shift in that moment my awareness of how I was loving and whether or not my love was just sitting on that open hand. And so that is why my coaching company is called Open Hands Coaching, because I teach people how to love themselves and others with open hands. And I will tell you what, if you can learn to love others with open hands, it will shift every relationship you have. If you learn how to love yourself with open hands, it will change your life and the way it feels to live it. And grief was a process of letting go and kind of grabbing onto my own self in the process, and realizing that my life jacket had been outside of me. And when the thing that's saving our life is outside of us, that's a really unsafe feeling when that life jacket shifts, changes, disappears, or dies. And so, to make a long story long, this grief was my love for my mother and my love for myself with nowhere to go until I figured out how to not stuff it and just let it happen. Learn how to feel my feelings and learn how to love myself the way my mother had loved me.
Wow. That's incredible. Thank you for all your vulnerability and sharing about your mom. Like, wow, what a beautiful being.
Mm-hmm.
And, what beautiful relationships she created. It's amazing.
And she wasn't perfect, but man,
yeah.
and we don't have to be. We can just love people well and be our own perfect selves. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's so cool the way you explain, your grief is that the grief is as your mother's love and your love, right? It's just so beautiful, that way to reframe it and how you recognized that you needed your life jacket, as you called it, to be you.
Mhm. And I had no idea it wasn't
Yeah.
me
Right.
until she died. And I also wanna say that it took years to get to it took years of running away from my grief, thinking I was dealing with my grief, thinking I was grieving, and then it took a good year and a half of actually really processing my grief and feeling my feelings to be able to say all of this to you. And at the beginning, grief is hell. It's trying to stay afloat in a stormy ocean. It takes almost all your energy. It's like it's it's work and it's a job and it is the job. And often it's just a piece of what we're trying to deal with because my kids were grieving too.
Yeah.
And I wanted to A, model that it was okay to grieve and miss people, but B, never let them see the scary, like raw emotion, and also be really responsible. One of the biggest safeguards and processing tools that I had was running. And a cousin whose parent had died the year before my mother told me that his grief showed up in yoga class. Anytime he started moving his body, his grief would come through and he would end up just weeping or having something or having rage come through. And so I was prepared. That was a new idea for me. And so I run each day, at least one, usually 2 miles. And so I was just prepared. Okay, grief's going to show up when I run, whatever that means. And oh, it did. And I learned to use that even on days when I thought I was okay. I would start going out for my run and I could feel it. This is way before the adult chair. This is way before I knew feelings were embodied, that the body keeps the score, that our emotions are in our body. I would start my run and I would make it a couple 100 meters and I could feel it coming up from the depths, like guts, belly, and up. And I would just book it, trying to get to the woods at the end of the street before I started crying because I didn't wanna scare people, it's so weird or,
Yeah.
alarming to see this woman bent over in the street crying, and then she gets up and is she okay? Do I need to call someone? Do I know who she is? Do I need to go out there? And it just happened, and there was no stopping it, and so I couldn't stop it, but I also knew it wasn't in my best interest to stop it. It was in my best interest to find privacy so that it could happen without me worrying about it scaring other people. I knew that if I didn't let my grief out of my body, it would come out of my body at my people, and usually at the people I was with the most or loved the most or was most relaxed around. And that meant my spouse and that meant my kids. And I did not want to injure anyone with my grief or with my not grieving. And that was one of my biggest concerns about grief was doing no harm. And so I learned talking with friends who would just listen, right? Who could stand. And I had to learn who could handle talking about death, talking about being afraid of my mother dying before she died, talking about what it might be like and what I was going to need to do. There's a lot of pain involved in that. And it takes a person who has some knowledge or comfort, or at least a not discomfort with that kind of intensity of emotion. And it was so helpful to have people to talk to um, who weren't trying to fix anything. Your mother's dying of cancer. There's no fixing that, right?
Right.
Um, Someone has died. There's no fixing that. And honoring just being able to be present with someone and loving and accepting of whatever is happening for them and is true. Like just being that witness without needing to fix or change. I had a handful of people like that in my life, and it was such a gift. Such a gift. And now, having walked through grief, I have the capacity to be that for other people as well. And it's like the Girl Scout badge that nobody wants, but it's a pretty darn important badge when we consider being able to be of service to people who really need it. I read Barbara Bush's biography a few years ago, and one of the things that struck me about her was that people said that she ran towards others' pain. She didn't hide from it. And as a coach, it's really important for us to be able to hold space for other people's pain. And one of the beautiful, it's hard to say benefits or gifts, but one of the gifts of grief is to be able to have capacity to walk towards people who are in pain and not want to hide.
Yeah. Yeah. And we need those people, and we need you. So it is a Girl Scout badge that so many people don't want, but oh man, do we need that, right?
And no one ever wants someone else to have that badge, but it's helpful. There's some sort of comfort and companionship in not being the only one with it, even though you wish no one had it. Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, you mentioned a couple things, tools that sort of helped you navigate your grief. You mentioned running, and you mentioned just talking to people, which is one of the hardest things, can be one of the hardest things. Are there any other things that stood out for you as tools that sort of helped you move through?
Oh, I gave myself permission to absolutely fall into escapist fiction anytime I just needed a break.
Love it.
And there was something that I will say, I tried to go on my own for a year and a half. And then I just felt myself getting sadder and heavier and slower somehow. Not necessarily physically slower, but I could sense that it was just really hard to keep up with life. And so I booked a grief counselor appointment with just someone in my neighborhood, just a nearby. They were less than a mile away. And I will say that being heard, being validated, like, this is really hard. What you're dealing with is hard. Grief is hard. Just hearing someone say that gave permission for me to sort of surrender into it and not try to fight it anymore. It's like, oh, I don't have to keep trying to pretend like things are okay. They're not. This is hard. And, I don't ever want to be in the grief Olympics and compare one person's grief to another's, because then there's only one, person who's allowed to grieve. So even with small griefs, what we might consider to be a small grief, just being seen and validated and being able to say aloud, like, this is hard. This isn't easy. I don't like how this feels. This isn't how I wanted it to be. And then just feel that resistance of, this isn't what I wanted it to be. And let that be true.
Mm-hmm.
Because when we resist the resistance, we create more. And it's really accepting the resistance and not giving it the keys to the bus and letting the resistance drive us in anger down the highway, but just really sitting with that part, knowing that, like, the resistance might be a number of our cookie cutters who just really need, like I needed a grief therapist to say, this is really hard. We say that to our resistance. Yeah, this is really hard.
Hey folks, sorry for the interruption. I just wanted to quickly share some news. I have created a small group coaching adventure to help women who are navigating divorce and breakup. There will be 8 weekly live calls with me It's going to be transformative, and I am super excited. Doors are opening soon, so check the show notes for info. Okay, back to the show. Yeah, I think that piece about seeing and allowing is so important. Not just grief, with really any emotions, because when we try to outrun them, they will just keep
They're still there.
chasing us until they catch up.
It's like they're
And
attached
tackle
to our
us
tail.
to the ground. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I love how you talked about finding ways to allow yourself space to sit in your grief so that it didn't come up at unwanted times and unwanted places. And I think that's the thing that happens too often when we do try to suppress or push them down, or like, nope, can't do this, can't do this. That's the problem that can happen, is that it will show up and you have no idea when it's going to show up. And then it could be havoc. So I love that you had that awareness, like, I need to feel this and I want to be able to control sort of when and how that happens. So I'm going to give myself that space.
Yeah. You're so right. And what I tell clients sometimes is grief, like being a responsible grief owner, is not unlike scheduling potty breaks or having potty training. Like when you have a little kid who's potty training, you have to schedule the potty breaks or they schedule you, and they definitely happen. And you can only hold everything so long until it bursts forth. And that's a very earthy example, but I think it probably can be related to by every single person on the earth. We all know what that feels like. And especially if you envision a road trip, like have to work in breaks.
Yeah.
And when we're grieving, it's really important to schedule or at least make time for, or when we feel it starting, just go let it happen so that it doesn't come out later at an inconvenient time or in a way that comes at someone.
Yeah. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think there's often this idea of grief is just sadness. It's just crying. But even like you mentioned your friend who said sometimes it comes out of rage. And I think that's important to remember too. You don't really know how it's going to show up, which is another reason it's so important to make the space for it to come out. So
Like, who's grieving in the moment that it comes out? Which part, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And what does it look like? Because it's not always my today self that's having the grief. There were many days where I thought I was okay. And then I started running and it came up from the depths. And so it might not be running, or it might not be walking. It might not even be physical activity for everyone. But for anyone who's listening, who is undergoing grief or in the throes of it, whether it's fresh grief or an older grief, I'm guessing they have a sense of, oh, this is how my grief comes up when I do, or when I'm in this environment and like, just let your awareness be a tool and a gift for you to be able to use, so that, like, the point is to be able to grieve and have it still stay love with our other people, right? Because we can take our feelings and our emotions and use them against people or throw them at people, and we end up lonely with broken or like damaged relationships. And if grief is the flip side of love, of just kind of the price we pay for love, getting used to the physical love of, and I'm just talking about a death of somebody here. It could be a relationship, it could be a divorce, it could be a job loss, a move you didn't want to have to make, moving away from people. Like, we can take our emotions about that and throw them at people, and then we end up lonelier and hurting worse. And so I wanted to be very conscientious about the way I grieved, that it wasn't damaging my people or my relationships with them. And I wasn't perfect about that, but I think walking into it with that awareness was very helpful for me to be responsible with my grief, that I didn't hurt myself. I did in a way because, of course, I ran from it and I didn't understand what surrendering to it meant for years. Um, and that's okay because who wants to? It just took me a while to learn that lesson and now I know it.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Um, this is great. So, I wanted to ask about some things that may have shifted for you throughout this process. And you can just talk about whatever jumps out for you. Things like self care, your support system, boundaries, your sense of self. You touched on some of this already, I think. And it's kind of sounds like, you moved into this grief process. And I'm wondering, is it because of that? Or was it just sort of alongside that you started doing your personal work that sort of started shifting things in your life?
That's a really great question. The personal work that I started, like the really big personal work, the deep stuff,
Yeah.
started with me finding the Adult Chair podcast. And then a year-ish later, signing up for the coaching certification, which is where I met you.
Mhm.
But I was doing work before that. And I will say, well, we can either like completely shove our grief in an old trunk and lock the door, or we can wear it and see that it's wearing us sometimes, if that makes
Mm,
sense. And I'd been wearing it for a while and it had been wearing me.
mm,
And it was still there and there was still so many tears right below the surface. And so I knew there was something more that I needed. And it turned out it was the parts work,
mm,
the self-love, the utter acceptance of self that the adult chair model teaches. And it was also learning how, well, let me say, I was one of the first in my circle of friends and in my family to have a parent die. And that's a
mm,
beautiful thing that, there were so many people my age and in their 30s and in their 50s whose parents were both still living and hadn't had experienced this. And so that was beautiful because who wants the badge, right? But also difficult because there weren't a ton of people who really were ahead of me on that road. Um, and I was angry sometimes at the lack of understanding and the lack of support. But ultimately, what I realized is that I didn't know how to support or understand myself. And I
mhm,
really wanted someone else to be there to do it for me the way my mom had been there to love me in such a way that I never had to learn how to do it myself. And what really sucks is when this job that, maybe we needed to do or needed to eventually do suddenly absolutely needs to be done. And now it's in crisis. And it's the worst time to have to learn how to do something. And the person who would help you is the one who died. Like, then it just feels like, you know, take all the plates out of the cabinet, throw them up in the air and let them all crash to the ground. And it was really just the end of all the plates spinning and everything crashing. And it felt like life was crashing and there wasn't a way out of it and there wasn't a way forward. I had very few tools of self-support at that time.
yeah. So it sounds like, I mean, would you say it sounds like a lot of things shifted for
Oh,
you? The way you took care of yourself
mhm.
shifted as a result of you kind of, being thrown into this situation of experiencing
Eventually.
grief, right? Like,
Eventually. I mean, I just kept going trying to take care of my people for a while.
mm,
You know.
well, that's what. That's what we know. So
What I
that's
knew
what we
how to
do,
do.
right?
Yeah. And so I guess what first happened was there were awarenesses. And sometimes the awareness came out of, this is getting so hard. I don't know what else to do. And then those were the moments where I might have sat and just cried for a while. Just getting to the edge of myself. And then finally letting some of the grief out and then finding, oh, there's actually a little more of myself that I'd never seen before, but it's different. And it requires me to show up differently and with curiosity. And who the hell has time for that right now? We're grieving. Like, life has been falling apart for a while. So I will say it was a push pull for a long time.
Mm, yeah.
There are certain tasks of grieving that I learned about through a hospice group. And the fourth one was being able to transition your person from the physical world to a place or a space and time. And like the task itself is loose. Your person has died, so they're no longer in the physical world. So where do you want to imagine them? On an island, on Maui with under an umbrella with a drink in their hand, up on a cloud, in like Care Bear heaven, or only in your memories. And I transitioned my mother to my heart.
Mm,
And I could talk to her and ask her questions. And especially if I was at a point with a kid where I just didn't know, like, what do I do? What's the right thing to do in this situation, with teenagers or kids struggling in school or this or that, or I could ask my mother in my heart and hear her response. Like, I just knew what she'd tell me. I had never had access to her wisdom before like that. And somehow I shifted her to my heart and I had everything that I had been missing, almost everything, not everything, but I had more than I had had when there'd just been the gap and the hole and, the torn place in the spider web of our family. Um, and so completing that task of grieving, of transitioning her to my heart, gave me access to her 24/7. Anytime I needed to tell her something or ask or just say, Mom, I just need to feel like you still love me. Help me learn
wow.
to love me like you. That's when things really started to shift. So
Mm,
it's just such hard work, and we're doing it at the hardest point of our lives.
yeah.
Who learns how to grieve before you have to? Like, why would anyone do that? That would be a little bit of a weird thing.
Yeah, exactly.
So we're
Yeah.
often at the worst point in our lives with the least resources, having to do the most important work of our lives. And it's just one of those sort of unfair shit shows.
Yeah. Yeah. So how about as a result of moving through this, did any of your relationships change? Because like you even said, there are some people who can't hear it, or even just because you were moving through grief, you you as a person were changing and evolving.
Mhm,
And so that whole transition that you're in,
mhm,
moving through grief, befriending grief, living with grief and learning about it and allowing it, and your own like personal evolution. So with that can tend to come some realizations that some relationships don't fit anymore. Is that something that you experienced?
there were relationships that became closer and relationships that became more arm's length.
Mm,
And some of it had to do with their capacity, and some of
yeah.
it had to do with my capacity.
Mm,
Um, and really just what their capacity was to be able to hold space or remember that my life felt different than their life in that moment. And there were people that asked things of me during fresh grief. And like that would be like going to someone's house that had surgery and asking if they could drop off dinner later, next week. Like it's not that way around, right? Um, and that, no judgment or upset. Like we do those things because we don't understand. And here's the thing about grief. The only way to get out of it is to be the first one to die. Like the longer you live, the more people you will lose. There's no getting out of this life alive. And the price of living is saying goodbye to other people.
Yeah.
And so we all end up having to learn how to grieve. Hopefully, we learn how to grieve well. And so for the people who aren't able to be supportive, and for the people listening, I'm sure you can think of, if you're grieving, you've got a list of 5 people right now who were not supportive family members or friends or whatever. But time is probably going to shift that, and they will experience it themselves and then learn how to show up better. And that's like, you don't want them to have that badge, right?
Right.
It's a terrible way to learn how to be a supportive person during grief. And there are friendships and relationships that I really wish could have been more supportive, and they weren't. And that was really hard. Some of my primary people didn't know how to support grief, hadn't been through it themselves yet. And that was really difficult. But ultimately, I didn't know how to support myself either.
Yeah.
And I don't look forward to the next grief that I have. But I do know that I will be able to support myself better. And I will say that my relationship with my father changed possibly the most. And my mom had been my primary parent, like the one, if I was going to call one of them, probably she was going to be back when there was a landline, she was probably the one to pick up the phone in the first place. But she was the one I'd talk to. And then maybe I would call my dad if my car broke down. Like, so, you know, and then, and then my mom died, and he was my only parent. And I realized it was going to feel like having both parents die if I didn't figure out how to have a relationship with my dad that even came close to being the one I had with my mom. And that took both of us working. What I will say about my father, physician, like he'd been the one giving people the diagnoses and the hard news and being the kind, really caring physician caregiver, right? But he hadn't been the patient. And so his experience of being on the other side of medicine really changed who he was. And his experience of being a caregiver changed a lot about who he was, and all for the better. And he was able to help me learn how to grieve and feel my feelings and just let them happen and then keep living my life. And he would say, life is for the living. And so you can grieve, pause to grieve, but then keep living.
Mhm.
Like take the step out of grief and get back into life each time the grief comes. And the conversations we have now, I don't know if either of us would have known how to have before when my mom was there. And I won't ever wish my mom to have died. Like I will always want her to be back here with us. But what a gift to be able to experience that relationship with my dad in a way that I didn't before.
Yeah. What a gift.
Mhm.
That's really beautiful.
He's a pretty cool guy.
Thank you for sharing that. Oh, before I forget.
Who said that? 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 Who said that?
You have a quote to share.
I do. And I want to talk about just a little bit about the way my marriage changed too. But I will first.
Definitely. Yeah.
This quote is from my mother and what she used to tell Carol Brennan Klaus. created this quote, and she used to tell, especially people giving themselves a really hard time, do your best, but know your best will look different on different days.
Oh, wow.
Do your best, but know your best will look different on different days. And as parents, as, employees, as business owners, as humans, we know that a lot of days it's just harder to show up in the same capacity. Tuesday might be really easy and Monday wasn't. And both of those days, you may have done your best. And often we give ourselves a really hard time for the Mondays and expect every day to be the Tuesday. And that's just not realistic. And so I love that quote. It gives so much freedom, and it allows ourselves to treat ourselves with compassion and empathy and kind of kick the expectations to the curb sometimes, the unrealistic expectations. But back to my marriage, I want to say that my spouse over the years has learned some really beautiful, beautiful things about being supportive. And just this summer, I was reading a book, and at the end of the book, the mother figure died. And I was fine reading it. And we were both sitting in lawn chairs in the yard. He was reading his book, I was reading mine. I closed the book, and he noticed and said, "Oh, how was that? Did you finish it?" And I started to talk about it, and then I just felt it coming up from the depths, and I bawled my eyes out of nowhere, just covered my face and silent sobbed in the yard for about the 90 seconds or 2 minutes. And I know to just let it happen and not try to figure out what it is, but just feel it in my body and notice it and allow it. Because the sooner I do that, the sooner it's able to release. And what he said at the end, well, I first did my crying and then recovered. And it took, 3 or 4 minutes total to do the crying and the recovering. And then I said, well, here's what happened at the end of this book. And it made me think of my mom. And he said, oh, honey, you never have to tell me that. There's only one thing that will bring that much emotion for you. And I just know to hold space for you now and be with you while you feel. And that you don't need me to fix anything. You just need me to be here with you, witnessing in love. And like, whoo.
Wow.
That is, yes, all of that. Yes.
That's incredible. That is so powerful. And
I felt so seen too. Like, I'm not sure I knew that about myself, that anything that would bring up that emotion was probably going to be linked to my mom.
Yeah.
And that's true for right now. And eventually, if I'm blessed to live long enough, it will probably be linked to more, right? But that's this for right now. And he's noticed that about me. And what a beautiful partner to know, okay, this is what this is. I know just to wait here and love her and not try to fix anything. And that's the biggest gift.
Yeah. I don't think you can ask for much more.
Yeah.
Someone to just hold space with no judgment and know what you need.
Yeah. And not trying to fix it.
Not try to fix it. I mean, that's a big one.
Yeah.
Trusting
me to feel what I needed to feel.
Yeah.
And that it would just pass. And then I would be able to get back to living.
That's so awesome. I love it.
Yeah.
He's a cool guy.
It's a hard road to walk, but it can be walked with grace. But there's usually some thrashing before we get to the grace, and that's okay.
It's all okay.
It's all okay.
And the more we allow it, the easier it is for us to keep moving.
Yeah, but most of us don't know how to allow it. And so I think that's a really big piece, is just learning. If people were going to do something now to prepare for future grief in a way that wasn't weird or morbid, it would just, I would just recommend learn how to feel your feelings now. Learn how to feel the anger. Learn how to place and sense the emotion in your body, the physical sensation of the emotion. And when I heard, I bet I had to hear that 4 times, maybe more, before I even had an idea of what that meant. I was like, what does that even mean? The physical sensation of your emotion in your body? What are you talking about?
Right.
So I had absolutely no awareness of what that meant. And also, I learned how to do it. And that would be a very useful thing to do before you needed to know how to do it. So if anyone has any curiosity, like there's information out there. I am sure you know how to coach people on how to do that. I know how to coach people on how to do that. There's free information out there. That would be a beautiful way to honor yourself. And it will certainly change your life right now. Just
Absolutely.
in that process. Mhm.
Absolutely. Yeah. Not only preparing for possible grief, but it's going to help you in every area of your
Oh my
life.
gosh, it
So,
sure does. It helps drain the emotional tank because a lot of us have been stuffing what I would say your average 40-year-old walking around probably has 30, 35 years of suppressed emotions hanging out in there.
easily. Oh my gosh. Drain the
So,
tank. Yeah,
drain the
for sure.
tank before something else huge splooshes in and it's like a cannonball and everything
Yeah.
flies out. Yeah.
Yeah, and crushes you. Well, if people would like to learn with you about feeling their emotions, how can they get in touch with you?
Oh, yeah. So I can be found at openhandscoaching.com. My email is angela@openhandscoaching.com. I do one-on-one coaching and I teach a group class that is just a really beautiful. We learn how to feel our feelings. Start with nervous system regulation, how to feel feelings, how to tell intuition and separate it from fear. We work on triggers, we work on self-love, we work on reflective listening. It's just a really beautiful foundational class of learning how to live life from the best place in a way that feels so comfortable in our bodies. And it's really difficult to be in the world right now and feel comfortable in our bodies and feel safe. And so, nervous system regulation is such a huge, like, we all need it. We all need it right now.
Yeah.
And so that's how you can find me.
Yeah. That sounds like a really beautiful group.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Awesome. So I will put all your contact info in the show notes for sure so people can connect with you.
Yeah.
Anything else you'd like to share before we wrap it up?
I do have a free gift for listeners on my website, openhandscoaching.com/regulated. There's a free 21-day nervous system regulation reset that people can access, and some videos that show some techniques, and then a journal that they can download and kind of track data and journal out some emotions.
That's awesome. Thank you so much.
A beautiful tool of self-discovery and self-care. Just the nervous system piece is life-changing, absolutely life-changing, in my opinion.
Agree. Well, thank you so much for making time to chat with me today. I so appreciate your time and your vulnerability and your openness. And I just think, your story can help so many people. I think it's really important to share the hard stuff, not just the good stuff, because we all need to be reminded that we're not alone. So thank you for sharing your story.
You're welcome. And I will say that learning how to feel the hard stuff also lets us learn how to feel the good stuff more cleanly and more deeply and in a more lasting way. And that has been a joyful part of the grief journey. It's how good it feels on the other side. And it has been such a pleasure and a gift to be with you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you. All right, great. Well, then I guess we'll wrap it up here. I could go on a couple more hours, but schedules.
Yeah. Oh, and we kept it to under an hour. Look at that.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Okay.
Good job.
Well, thank
Good
you.
job keeping me on track too. There was one point where I was like, what did she ask me? And then it was like, I don't know. Just keep talking.
We went with the
She'll pull
flow.
us around.
It's perfect. All right. Well, for everyone listening or watching, you are enough just as you are, and you are loved. Make a great day. Hey, before you go, if you enjoy The Human Show, you can help me spread the word by sharing it and leaving a review. Thank you.